What does the new season of HBO's White Lotus tell us about American religion? My name is Benjamin Park. I'm a scholar of American religion, and I often teach courses on American religious history, seeking for ways to find examples and modern media expressions that capture some of the key tensions. And I think I found it in the White Lotus. I've been a huge fan of the White Lotus for all three of their seasons. And as the third season was announced, and it was said that Mike White, the showrunner, was going to be focusing on religion and taking the White Lotus franchise to Thailand, I was excited. But while I expected that there would be meditations on death and belonging and Buddhism, and there certainly is that, there's also a lot in the series about American religious history. And in fact, I would argue that you could look at a lot of the main characters, and they are presenting an allegory on the variety of American religious identities and expressions over the last few decades. Let me walk you through some of the characters to show you what I mean. Now, when I'm talking about religious identities and expressions, I don't necessarily mean particular denominations, especially within the Christian traditions, whether it be Baptists or Methodists or Episcopal or what have you. But rather, I mean core identities at the heart of religious anxieties and practices and ideas. These are often interdenominational, and they can be found across a variety of different traditions. They can be rooted in political ideas or social groups or in geographic regions. Let me give you a few examples. Now we have Kate, who is one of the three women friends who are reuniting in White Lotus, and things are going great with them. She represents MAGA Christianity in modern America. Not that she's this outright MAGA troll presenting her politics on others. Rather, she kind of reflects as a more sedated, laid back, still culturally superior sense. But remember, Kate joined her Christian church when she moved to Austin. She was telling her friends this over dinner. And she was blown away by how nice they were and how she was able to fit in. Christianity, in other words, as connected to this particular social and political group, was a form of belonging and prestige that allowed Kate to fit into her surroundings. She also exhibits a bit of discomfort with some of the ideas that come with it. Remember at the dinner table where she goes, "Are we really going to discuss Trump right now?" That shows these tensions at play for a large number of MAGA conservatives, just not the outright trolls. She's also very unwilling to consider her complicity in bigger problems and the consequences of her actions on others, like sharing gossip. But let's take another example. We have Timothy and Victoria, the married couple from North Carolina. On the one hand, they admit they don't attend church that often, so how religious can they be? But they represent a very particular religious identity, and that's the gospel of wealth. They believe they're religious, even if they're not church going, because they believe that they are a chosen family, that they have values. Remember, Tim talks about his grandfather, who was the governor of North Carolina, and Victoria, when she's chastising her daughter Piper for following Buddhism, she says, "You're giving up our values." That is part of a very entrenched tradition in America connected to the gospel of wealth, of families believing that they have achieved their privileged and their status and their hierarchical positions within society due to their great values passed on through heritages. By the way, I think that Tim and Victoria fit into a longer literary tradition in America with William Faulkner, Tennessee Williams, who are exploring the legacies of these Southern hierarchical families. And it's not a surprise that that same literature often focuses things on lost legacy as well as incest, not to give any spoilers. This is also why when the family is faced with the threat of losing all their wealth, that is like a religious death to them, and it causes a total cultural unmooring. Let's stay with that family for a bit, because we also have Saxon, the son of Timothy and Victoria. On the one hand, he can represent the religious tradition of hedonism, right? Seeking pleasure wherever he wants. But I'm more interested in how he represents the religious tradition in America known as social Darwinism, the survival of the fittest, that him drinking all those protein shakes and then telling his brother that everyone wants to be used. That's a reflection of an idea that the fittest rise to the top, right? The survival of the fittest, that Darwinian principle placed in a social context, and that I am able to do what I want because I am chosen. That is embedded in a lot of religious cultures. Kristen Dumais' wonderful book, Jesus and John Wayne, shows how this sense of domineering masculinity has become the heart of modern day evangelicalism. But let's take three other characters to explore how they also reflect these broader anxieties. And by the way, if you are enjoying this type of analysis, make sure to follow my page, because I like to offer a lot of religious reflection in modern media on Mormonism, evangelicalism, and all things, because religion is truly intertwined with American culture and politics at this point, and we can learn a lot from it. Let's dig into Chelsea. Now, Chelsea is in many ways the perfect embodiment of the spiritual but not religious movement. The fastest growing religious community in America are those called the Nones, Nones, that have no religious affiliation but still maintain some type of spiritual principles. You could tell she loves her tarot cards probably. She wants a spiritual connection with her spouse. She is deeply committed to her individual principles, but she also doesn't want to be tied down with traditions or institutions. She is a free spirit, and that's what dominates her life, and that's what is really attractive to a lot of young Americans now who follow this spiritual but not religious practice. We also have Jacqueline, the aged but successful actor. She doesn't talk much about religion, but she reflects the entrenched American religious tradition of the gospel of desire. She wants to be wanted. That is the core of her identity. Think about when she's at the dance club and she loves the other younger girls watching her dancing up with other men. And then, of course, she gets with men that maybe she's not supposed to because she wants to be wanted, even though she's in a relationship. That is one of the current themes that I try to emphasize to my students of religion, the desire to make yourself attractive and basing your worth on how that attraction is portrayed in others. And then finally, we have Rick, who is the classic embodiment of the gospel of vengeance. Everything he does, his entire identity, his agenda, is trying to get retribution for a past alleged wrong. And that focus is what keeps him from finding joy in the life in front of him with Chelsea, as well as bringing him into danger, like the quest he's now embarking on, which is, I imagine, we still have 2 episodes to go, is going to get him in quite a bit of trouble. And then finally, we have Piper and Lachlan, the other 2 children of Tim and Violet. They represent the younger generations in America who are spiritually unmoored, similar to Chelsea in the spiritual but not religious. But these 2 capture a sense of wandering, a sense of not being anchored to anything, trying to find new connections. Obviously, Piper, she's exploring Buddhism, trying to find a sense of purpose outside of the materialism of her family's wealth and prestigious lifestyle. And then Lachlan is searching for something perhaps a little more hedonistic. On the one hand, his experience with Saxon, we'll call it the tugboat experience, and then now him going off with Piper to the monastery. So they represent the American society, especially younger generations, seeking for something and likely to be disappointed with what they find. Now, the White Lotus does not only give us religious seekers and the variety of those expressions, but the show also gives us a couple gurus. Of course, we have Luang Teera, the monk at the local monastery, who gives a grand soliloquy on how Americans have lost their way and in their quest to avoid pain, in the pursuit of pleasure. They are losing their core self. Sadly, that instruction seems to be misappropriated by Tim, who now sees death as a relief. We'll see where that goes in the final couple episodes. But we also have, in the classic Mike White tradition, Frank as a spiritual guru who gives his story of how he came to find his identity, that is in reality at its base a conversion story, how he converted to his true identity, but going through a number of avenues that you probably wouldn't hear in many Sunday sermons. And there you have it. That's my general overview of White Lotus Season 3 and what it tells us about the tapestry of American religious history. Mike White is doing a lot with this series. He's experiencing questions of death, loss, betrayal, longing, but he's also telling us a lot about American religion here. That's what he's doing by taking these Americans and placing them in a foreign climate and forcing them to come into contact with competing ideas and values. If you like this kind of analysis, you can go back and watch my other video where I dissected the Hulu series Devil in the Family about Ruby Franke. And if you like this type of dissection of American religion, politics, and culture, this channel is for you, because that's what I love to geek out about.